we'll take a look at this gorgeous looking, delicious looking turkey vegetable soup we just made. Does that not look delicious, everyone? It looks and it tastes fantastic. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Nana the Canner, and I want to welcome you back to the edge of the boreal forest. And today, or the last couple of days, we made and canned turkey vegetable soup. I really did find it difficult piecing through the USDA guidelines in making this soup recipe. Prior to attempting to follow the USDA guidelines, I basically raw packed all of my vegetables into the jar and put my broth and my seasonings on top and pressure canned it and called it a day. But in trying to make soups in a safer method following the guidelines, I found it very difficult in the book, the Complete Guide to Home Canning 2023 edition. I found it difficult to piece through the actual directions. It's for somebody that's new to the guidelines, it's very vague and it doesn't really explain things very well. For example, it talked about covering the meat with water and cooking until tender, and we did that. And we removed the meat from the bones and we reserved the broth. And then it said cooked vegetables. And then it went on to talk about dried peas and beans. But that's all it said was cooked vegetables. Then it said drain all foods and combine with meat broth, tomatoes, or water to cover. Boil 5 minutes. Fill hot jars only halfway full with mixtures of solids and then add broth to cover remaining liquid, leaving 1 inch headspace. I got stuck on the cooked vegetables part. Wasn't exactly sure what they meant by that. Did they mean to blanch the vegetables separately? Did they mean to put all the vegetables together and cook them? If so, how long? And so I looked in the Complete Book of Home Preserving from Bernardin and Ball, and many of their recipes, or a few of their recipes in there, also had different times in regards to like vegetable soup compared to the chicken soup recipe. So I was quite stuck on that. But because my my turkey soup recipe here is quite a large batch, I was very confident that the amount of time it took to heat it up would be sufficient enough. And then I left it at a medium boil for about 5 minutes until the vegetables were becoming tender. And then I took it off and let it sit for a little bit before I put the food in the jars. So it's all left up to interpretation in the USDA guidelines. And I've hoped that I have followed them the best I can in regards to this recipe. Again, if you're thinking of making this, take a look at the guidelines and research it for yourself, and you decide how long these vegetables are supposed to be cooked and when they should be put into the jars. And it's your decision. You need to decide that for yourself. All right, let's talk about cost. First of all, how does this compare to the name brand soups? First of all, this is a 1 quart jar, which is 4 cups or 1,000 mils. There's 1,000 milliliters of soup in here. When you take a look at the brand name soup, which is actually chicken noodle soup because Campbell's doesn't make turkey vegetable soup. The brand name soups, these 2 cans, each one has approximately 515 mils in it. So it's very, very close to the quart jar, with the exception is that there's probably an extra couple tablespoons in the canned product. So I wanted to compare and see if it actually paid to make and pressure can your own soups. So the turkey I got on sale for $1.99 a pound, which was great. The potatoes, carrots, celery, corn, peas, and onions I all had to buy because I don't have a garden this year, which is a whole different story. If you want to hear that, take a look at the link in the description box down below. I did not have to buy any of my broths because I learned how to make large batch broths. We used turkey broth, we used a little bit of onion broth and some veggie broth, so I did not have to pay for that. So with the turkey, all of the vegetables and the cost of the lids divided by 28, because there is a total of 28 quarts of soup. We made 28 of these. My cost was $2.40. That's it. All right, so say one of my locals wants to go and make it and they have to buy the broth. I even figured that out. With the broth and everything included, it would cost one of my locals $3.45 to make this. Well, how does that compare? Is it even worth it? Well, when you compare 1 quart of soup to the 2 cans of Campbell's chicken soup, 2 cans cost $9.58, and I was just shocked. That's a lot of money. So the difference between the two was $6.13. And I do believe we have a winner. Yay! I mean, the difference is a third of the cost. Now, can you imagine if you learned how to make your own vegetable broth and your own turkey or chicken broth? And can you imagine if you were able to raise your own turkeys or even raise your own vegetables? That cost could be cut right down to basically the seasonings, like the salt and pepper that you use, and the cost of the lid. Like, this is the best way to go, and it tastes far better than what you get here. Move over, Campbell's. It's time for turkey vegetable soup. All right, we've talked about the USDA guidelines and we've talked about cost. Let's talk about taste here. I did not season this recipe up. It only has a little bit of salt and pepper in it, and for good reason, is because when your soups sit in a canning jar, the seasonings tend to enhance over time, and you may find that they will become too spicy or too much seasoning or too much flavor to it, almost to the point where you might not be able to eat it. That happened with my last batch. So unfortunately, we're probably watering it down with another can of soup just to eat it. But that's why it will be a little bit bland, is because that gives you the opportunity after you open the jar to season it. And that's the way I like to do my soups. If you prefer to season it up right off the hop, that's totally up to you. But just be aware that those seasonings and spices that you put in that jar, they will enhance over time. All right. Now, without further ado, I bring you the home canned 28 quart turkey vegetable soup recipe, and I hope you enjoy. Well, good morning everyone, and welcome back to the kitchen. This week we're going to be canning up turkey vegetable soup, and I'm going to be taking a turkey that we had from our freezer and going to roast it up and get that prepared for this week's project. So I'm just going to get it prepared for roasting, and for roasting for this purposes, it would just be very basic. I would probably salt and pepper the inside and outside of the bird, and then use a little bit of poultry seasoning also on the outside of the bird as well. And prior to putting it on the outside, I'm going to be brushing it with a little bit of margarine just to give it that extra flavor. This size of turkey will have to cook in a medium oven, approximately 350 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 3 hours, and then it will be done. And I'll probably baste it a couple of times in between, and then we can take it out and let it cool, and then we'll piece it up for our turkey soup that we're going to be canning later on this week. Not going to waste this little bit. There we go. Add a little bit of water to the bottom. I might add more later, but this is good for now. All right, so the bird is ready to go in. All right, our turkey is done. It was approximately a 4-kilogram turkey, which is about 8.8 pounds. It was in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 3 hours and 15 minutes. I basted it probably about 4 or 5 times during that time. And we'll just take a look at it. Oh, doesn't that look delicious? That is going to make the most amazing canned turkey soup tomorrow. So we're just gonna let it cool down and rest, and a little later on, I will bring you back and we'll just piece this, this beautiful turkey apart and get it prepared for our canning project later on. So this is what we have. I took and I pieced apart the turkey and took off as much meat as I could from the bones. And we got a nice round roaster full of meat out of that turkey. That was a 4 kilogram turkey. And then we have the bones and the drippings out of the pan in this pot. And I'm going to add water, probably about 2/3 full. And we're gonna put that on the stove and we're gonna simmer the remaining flavors out of those bones and try and get a little bit more meat off of that. All right, so we have it on the stove. I did fill it 3/4 full. So we'll bring it up to a nice low simmer, and we will bring you back when we're done simmering up our broth. Keep all your vegetable scraps and freeze them for veggie broth later on. So I've taken 5 pounds of carrots and I've peeled them and I've rinsed them. I'm just gonna set them aside now. And I'm gonna start on the celery. And I also cut up the leaves on the celery as well. These smaller ones I'll just put in the veggie scraps. Okay, so 2 stalks of celery here. And I'm gonna just wash them up and set them aside. Okay, so we have 3 pounds of onions. We're just gonna cut the ends off. Just 3 pounds of yellow onions. We'll just split them in half and we'll just peel them back here. Keeping the onion scraps for veggie stock. That little skin on there. Yeah, it's fairly easy if you just cut them in half and just peel the outside layer off. Most times that outside layer isn't good anyways. Okay, so I'm just coarsely chopping up the onion. And then I just break it apart a little bit so we don't have to spend too much time doing that tomorrow. We have here 3 pounds of onion, coarsely chopped. Bigger ones I slice in half once I get to this point. Smaller ones are okay. So that is 2 large celery stalks chopped up, and I even chopped up the leaves too because they taste good in the soup as well. So that's 2 large celery stalks. So we have peeled and sliced 5 pounds of carrots here. So now all these vegetables are going to go in the fridge downstairs overnight until we make up our soup in the jars tomorrow. So we put our veggie scraps into a large freezer bag and we'll just seal it up. Get all that air out. Seal it right up. And we're gonna put that in the freezer. And the next time we go to make veggie broth, we'll be using these veggie scraps. Nothing goes to waste. Well, good morning everyone. It's the next day here and we're going to continue on making our turkey soup. The stock pot with the meat and the broth in it last night, I took that and I let it cool down and I put it in the fridge overnight, and I just have it heating up a little bit on the stove now. We still need to take and strain off that wonderful broth and take the remainder of the meat off of those bones. Also too, last night I washed up 28 quart jars and the bands. I still need to do the lids, They're just sitting over on the windowsill over here. I don't know that I'm gonna need 28 quarts, but I wanna make sure that I have enough for at least 4 pressure canners full in case we need it. We also need to bring our canners up, our pressure canners up, and get them prepared. And then the last thing to prepare food-wise would be to shred up the turkey that's in the fridge, and also peel and dice up our potatoes. And then at that point, we will be ready to assemble it. So let's get started. Okay, so yesterday when I pulled that turkey apart, I hadn't pulled apart the wings or the drums. So I wasn't sure if Papa was gonna have a snack or not. He likes to especially have the wings. But so today, since it didn't get eaten last night, I pulled all of the meat off of the bones, and I took and I shredded everything up. And let's see here. This is what I got. So that's what we have to work with. And we're gonna put the rest of these bones into the stock pot for a little bit while we finish setting everything else up. All right, so our turkey is shredded, and we're gonna move on to our potatoes. I have about 7 pounds of potatoes sitting there. I don't know that we're gonna need all that. Maybe 5 pounds would have been okay. But by the time you get the peelings off, you're gonna lose about a pound or so, I would think. So we're gonna go with 7 pounds and see how that works out. So I'll just get these peeled up. All right, so we have all of our potatoes peeled, so we're just gonna get them ready and set up to chop up. And we're gonna take all of our potato peelings, and it's gonna go in our veggie scrap bag in the freezer to make veggie broth later on. So we don't wanna cut these up too small. We want them a little bit on the bigger side, because if you cut them too small, they will cook quicker and they will not be very nice in the jar. And yes, I understand and realize that those are quite big. We maybe could cut down a little bit more, but even if they are this big, you can actually just take it in your bowl later on and just split it with your spoon, but not too small, because then they will end up turning to mush during the canning process in the jar. So I would say about that. So we're just gonna get the rest of these cut up. All right, that's a lot of potatoes. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rinse them a couple of times, and then we're gonna cover them with water, and then we're gonna take care of our broth. Okay, let's strain off this broth. We still got lots of meat there we can pick out. We're gonna pick these bones clean. Okay. And look at all that delicious broth. Now, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll put this in the fridge overnight, and then they'll strain off the oil off of it, or the fat. And I'm not going to do that. There isn't a whole lot of fat on here to strain off. You just see just a little bit. But I want that little bit of flavor in the jars, and I'm not concerned about having that little bit of fat in there. So this is, we'll probably have to do is bring up some more of the home canned jars of turkey stock, and maybe some veggie broth and onion broth to add. This may not be enough for the canning project, but I always have more in backup to use. So we're just gonna set this off to the side, and we're gonna pick these bones clean. Okay, so I got enough meat off of all of the turkey scraps for probably 2 more jars of turkey soup. You're probably saying, Nan, I don't really have time to do that. I just don't wanna bother, and that's fine, you do you. But if I'm going to take the time and effort to go this far with it, I want to make sure that I can up as much as I can, and I save as much as I can. 2 jars or 2 quarts of soup is 2 meals. So you make your choice whether you want to do that or not. All right, let's start assembling this soup and getting it ready. We may have to do this in 2 batches here. I am not sure, but we will start with that and we'll go from there. So we're going to take half the turkey. And we're going to put it in the pot. Okay, that's about half. Set that aside. Half the potatoes. That's about half. I'm doing this just in case we have to do another batch here because there's quite a few vegetables here. Half the celery. I would say that's about half. Now, half the carrots. That's half the carrots. Now we'll do half the onions. That's about half. And then to that we're going to add this is a 750 gram bag of green giant peas, so we're going to add half of that. Frozen. Save the other half for the next batch. And these ones, we're going to add half of that. These ones have been in the freezer for a little bit, so I'm anxious to get them used up. Now, when you're canning these up, you're supposed to have half solids and the rest broth. So we know for a fact we're not going to have enough broth in here when we put it in. But I just need enough to cover it and bring it to a boil for 5 minutes. And that essentially is the blanching process of the turkey soup. And so when we've added the broth, and I'm going to have to go downstairs and get some more, added the broth and bring it to boil for 5 minutes, then we'll be able to jar it up. So I'm just going to get the broth on here, and then we will put it on the stove and get it heating up. Okay, so we're going to pour approximately half of the broth that we made onto the vegetables. Okay, I'm going to just a little bit more. I'm going to say that's half. I need to get one of those jar openers. So this is a jar or a quart of homemade onion broth. So we're going to pour that on, give it some more flavor. Oh, that smells delicious. And we're going to put on a quart of homemade veggie broth. And 2 quarts of turkey broth. And these were made in 2022-2023. One more. There, our vegetables are pretty much covered. So like I said, we're going to have to add more to the jars later. but we do have what we need just to get them heated up and basically blanched through. There we go. Let's get this on the stove and we'll get her heated up, and it's got to boil for 5 minutes and then we can start jarring up. While this is boiling for 5 minutes, I'm going to get my pressure canners ready to go and I'll bring you back. All right, let's put the rack in our pressure canner here and we're going to fill it up to the recommended amount of water. Which I think in my pressure canner is 3 quarts. For the pressure canner that you own, please make sure that you go by the instructions that are included. If you don't have instructions, you say you bought a used or an old canner, please have it looked at and please find the instructions online so that you know exactly how to use your pressure canner. There we go. I'll do this with the second pressure canner as well. This pressure canner is a little bit smaller. We'll get this one filled. All right, let's take a look at the lid. So there is no gauge on this pressure canner. It's just a weight that sits on here that tells you when you've come up to pressure. In our area, we can at 15 pounds pressure. So we have the weighted gauge, and on the weighted gauge, you can take these two off here. So that's 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and 15 pounds pressure, and we always pressure can with 15 pounds pressure, so they never come off. So with your lid, you can see here this little gadget, when the canner gets up to pressure or starts becoming pressurized, this will come up. So when you're done canning, it has to come down before you even open up the lid so that you don't hurt yourself or burn yourself. This is the way you can tell that the pressure has come down. This is a safety feature. If it becomes too much pressure in the canner, this will pop off and release pressure. So you shouldn't have those stories or happenings that you heard from your grandmother about the canner blew up and hit the roof. This particular pressure canner has a safety feature for that. And so when you're looking where the weight would go on, you're going to look for that steady stream of steam to come out, and you're going to let that come out for 10 minutes and put your gauge on. This has to be open. This has to be, there are no occlusions in there, like no food or anything. So every time you go to do a canning project, you have to check that and make sure that there's nothing lodged in there. And then you take a look at your gasket here, make sure that there's no cracks or any tears. And then what I do is when I'm ready to do a canning project, and it is recommended that I just put a slight bit of canola oil along here, just so that when you are taking the lid off, that you don't have a stuck lid, because this is a fairly new gasket. Just a little hint that they give you. If the gasket was quite well used, you probably wouldn't have to do that. But so you're getting your lids and your canners ready, and we're just waiting for that soup to come up to a boil, and we're going to boil it for 5 minutes, and then we're going to start jarring it up. So I'm pretty excited. All right, so we've allowed it to boil kind of on a medium heat for 5 minutes, and that is considered the blanching process. And so now we're going to jar up this beautiful looking turkey vegetable soup, and then we're going to be topping it off with more broth. So we're just going to fill the solids first. We'll use up all our solids. Make sure that you get a nice amount of turkey and vegetables in your scoops. And about half full with your solids. Just a little bit more, I think. You can always top them off after. Okay, on to the next one. Primarily solids first. half onto the next one. So I did salt and pepper it just a little bit, but I don't want to add too much seasonings or spices, as what is already in the jar will kind of increase over time. It will become more flavorful. I have had it where I made turkey vegetable soup before, and after about a year or two in the jar, we're getting to the end, it started to become overwhelming with these seasonings. So I don't season it up a whole lot before it goes into the canner, but you can certainly do that after. I find it better to do it after you open up the jar. You know, add your little bit of thyme or parsley, whatever you want. So we have 13 quart jars, half filled with solids and then topped with the remainder of the turkey broth. At this point, I'm just going to debubble, and then we're going to top it off with some canned homemade turkey broth. So we'll just debubble and get all the air bubbles out of it. There is an opportunity with air in the jar that bacteria can grow in that area. Also, air affects your headspace, and you need the proper amount of headspace for canning projects, because what happens is the food will actually expand in the jar, and if you have too much food and not enough headspace, you'll end up popping the lids off the top of the jars, or you'll end up with siphoning, where you get the liquid coming out around the edges of the jar, around the seal. So give her a good debubble, and I'll bring you back when we're topping this off. Okay, so we're looking for about 1 inch headspace. So I do know whereabouts the 1 inch headspace is, but I will measure after I finish topping these jars off here. So we're just adding just a little bit more of that delicious homemade turkey broth that I canned up 2 years ago. Get that used up. There. So it's looking like we added 4 quarts of the homemade broth, and it's looking like we'll probably be adding 2 to top it off here. I'll have to open up another jar here. All right, so we've topped it off with additional broth to the 1 inch headspace, and that's what the amount we're going to need. Good. Now we have a small dish of vinegar and a paper towel, and we're just going to clean the rims to get rid of any debris that may be on the rims that could affect the seal. So we're going to clean each one of these really well, and then we're going to put the lids on and the bands. So when you're putting the lids on, center the lid on the rim, apply the band until fingertip tight. You want to be able to give it some space to expand, to expel some of that air. So center on the rim, and then fingertip tight. Center on the rim, and then the band, fingertip tight, and just like that. I was thinking I only had 13 jars, and I actually had 14. So I have 2 pressure canners full of the turkey vegetable soup, and we're gonna get them going here. Okay, so we'll get the lids on here. All right, and let's turn up the heat. Okay, so what we're looking for here is a steady stream of steam. So we definitely have a steady stream of steam from the large canner. I actually turned it on just a little bit sooner so that I could get them throwing steam at the same time. So that's a steady stream of steam. And we've got a pretty good stream of steam happening there on the smaller canner. So we're gonna go ahead and time 10 minutes. And when 10 minutes is done, all of the air should be evacuated out of the canners and the canner should be full of steam. And then we can actually put our weights on. So we're gonna time 10 minutes and then we'll bring you back. Okay, so we're at 10 minutes and you can see in the back that these little buttons have popped up. That means that the pressure canners are under pressure even without the weighted gauges on. So they've both vented for 10 minutes. So now we can put the weights on each one. And then we're gonna wait until they start to rock. And as they begin to rock, we're gonna just slowly pull back on the heat. And I know where my sweet spot is on this stove here, so it won't take long to figure out exactly where it needs to be to get that gentle rock. But once these start rocking, I'll bring you back. Okay, so the large canner, the weight is rocking on that one, so I'm just gonna back it off just a little bit, not too much, keeping in mind that if I back it off too much and it stops, then we have to start all over with our timing, so I don't want that to happen. So I'm just gonna gently back it off. And we just want that nice, slow, steady rocking. And we're just gonna wait for the other one. So we'll start timing this one. We're going to be timing it for 75 minutes for quarts. And then we're just gonna wait for this one to start rocking, and then we'll start timing that for 75 minutes for quarts. So the smaller canner, the weight on that is starting to rock. So that is only about 3 to 4 minutes behind the first canner. So we're gonna start timing that, and we're just gonna ease back a little bit on the heat there as well, just to find that gentle rock. Okay, so we will bring you back in 75 minutes. All right, we're back and it's been 75 minutes. So we're gonna turn the large canner off and we're gonna let that come down from pressure. And there's a few more minutes left for the small canner and we'll be able to turn that off as well. So it's been 75 minutes now for the second pressure canner, the small pressure canner. So we can turn the heat off on that. And now we just wait. Okay, so the button that indicates that the canners are under pressure has went down on the large pressure canner, and you can see on the small one back here that is actually still up. So we can't take the weighted gauge off of this one, but we can actually take the weighted gauge off of this one now. We'll just set it aside. Just twist the lid off of this one now. We can take the lid off because we know it's not under pressure anymore. Twist the lid and then lift it up and away from you. And then just leave it sit to let the steam come out. We'll take the lid off of this one. We've got our second batch of soup heating up. We'll just point it away from us. So we're gonna let that sit for a few more minutes and then we'll empty that canner. All right, look at that, guys. That is our first 2 canner fulls finished. You can see them bubbling and they're already sealing. So we're gonna go and repeat the exact same process, heating up that big pot of soup, low boil or medium boil for about 5 minutes, into the jars, top them off with more broth, lids, bands, into the canner, and repeat the whole same process all over again. And we'll bring you back when we're done. All right, it's 10 o'clock at night and the jars have been out of the canner for quite a little while now. And we've got 28 quarts of that beautiful turkey vegetable soup. And so far there's only one that hasn't sealed. But we're gonna leave them till tomorrow morning and then we'll check them all and then we'll wash them up. All right, everyone, welcome back. It is the next day, and when I got up this morning, I checked all of the seals, and we had one that did not seal, and we knew that one wasn't sealed last night when we went to bed. So I took all of the jars, and I tested them by doing the lift test, and every single one passed except for one more, where I lifted it and it actually let go, and so I don't lift it very high, and you gotta have your hand there to do that. But when that happens, that tells me that that was sealed, but that it wasn't a good seal. And so that one, because it became unsealed during that test, will go in the fridge along with the one that did not seal as well. So I washed the remainder of the jars up, nice hot soapy water, and dried them, and we marked them, and we have them all ready to go into storage. So now new practice is that you leave the bands off of the lids before you go to store them. And the reason why you do that is so that when you store them, if you should lose your seal, if it should pop up and you lose your seal, with a band on, it will hold it in place. And with temperature changes, what can happen is it can reseal because the band is putting pressure on that rim and that seal, that lid. So that creates a false seal. So in order to avoid that, we don't put the bands on when we store them anymore, because if you lose the seal, it's lost. And there's nothing there to put pressure on it and to enable it to reseal. And chances are, if this does happen, you're going to smell it before you find it. So this is it for the turkey soup, canned homemade turkey soup recipe. I hope that you enjoyed your time with me. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done already. I would appreciate your support. And please like, comment, and share. And I want to thank each and every one of you for watching till the very end. I truly appreciate it. And take care until the next video.